Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
Good. So welcome everybody. Today we are going to speak about the aerospace and defense ecosystem. For those of you that are new, I will make a brief introduction. The idea is to analyze today the main disruptions on that ecosystem, and also to look for possible solutions, okay, on those disruptions. This is the proposal. We will have 3 blocks in our session. The first one will be related to the conceptual framework. It will be delivered by 2 speakers. Today we will have Krzysztof Krystowski from the European Aerospace Cluster Partnership. Welcome, Krzysztof. I see you very well.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Antonio.
Hello. And later, I think that we will have Dr. Holger Lipowski from Roland Berger Consulting. Okay, this will be the first block. Okay, they will have 10 minutes, everyone, for their speech. Okay, and later we will go to a common discussion on identification of disruption and needs and potential solution. You will be all invited to share your expertise, your knowledge, your opinions. Okay, we will be, if possible, very brief in those interventions, because we are a lot of people and we need to discuss very important things during just 1 hour. But you are invited to participate. Please be proactive. Please share that information that is of great value for us at this moment. Okay. Without more introduction, we will start immediately with Krzysztof. Welcome, Krzysztof. Do you want the presentation right?
Yes, I have a presentation, so I would like to show it for you.
I need to say that Krzysztof is also our vice president of the European Cluster Alliance, one big part of our heart. Thank you, Krzysztof.
Indeed. How to find my share? Okay. Now and now presentation. One moment, please.
We are seeing.
Do you see my presentation now?
Yes. We are seeing it.
And if I put it on the full screen, now do you see it?
Yes, perfect. Now it's perfect.
Okay. For some reason I lost it. Once again. Here. Oh, okay. So I try to be brief. Frankly speaking, it would be even better that my presentation would be the second one, but I found out it just yesterday. So let's go as we planned, and then.
No, Krzysztof, we can move. It's just one moment to change.
But I don't know if Holger is now with us. This is the question. If he has already joined the meeting.
I don't know. Holger, are you there?
I don't see him.
So
maybe I will start. And then, because what is let me say first a few words about EACP, because this is very interesting initiative. Initiative is 10 years old, and to this EACP initiative, which is European Aerospace Clusters Partnership, belongs, as you can see, more than 40 clusters, more than 5,000 companies, more than 500 research institutes. So as you see, this is very old and much older than we, because we, European Cluster Alliance, we just established our organization to represent clusters last year. EACP has been established 10 years ago. And as you can see, this is a huge representation of clusters from European Union, and now not only from European Union, because Great Britain decided, UK decided to leave, but we have also colleagues from Turkey, for example. Now, the idea of EACP is to first to learn about market development in our aerospace industry, then to have a network, to team up with projects afterwards, then to organize together some business and research opportunities, and at the very last but not least, the idea of organization is also to try to represent our aviation aerospace society in front of European Union administration, to ask for better conditions for business we are working in. EACP is, because of that, you can understand, sharing knowledge, encouraging growth, supporting innovation. And we have 5 fields we are working on. This is strategy, internationalization, technology, skills, supply chain. So in those 5 groups, we discuss these subjects, and then at the end, we are preparing a common position of entire organization. Now, impact of COVID. I would like to say that impact of COVID on our aerospace activity is something tremendous. This is unbelievable. The civil aviation achieved almost 100% reduction of turnover because of COVID. Generally, civil plus cargo, it is still more than 90% on average. I think that there is very difficult to find another sector which was so much affected by COVID, and this is because of this is because of regulations. This is not directly because of COVID, frankly speaking. This is because of regulations, because of measures which were used to fight against COVID, and it distracted very much our capacity, competitiveness. So you can see that there is a huge negative impact on cash flow, staff. Just example, I read a few days ago that only Boeing reduced its staff in US of 7,000 people from day to day, and the same situation is now in every companies. Then problems with capital, with inventory. Then huge problems with R&D, because we have to look for some savings, where to find it. And quite often R&D is the first to say, okay, this is something for the future. This is not to survive today, because everybody are so much focused on today surviving. So this part of our activity would be also very much affected. And then supply chain is natural that we have problems with our partners. We are problems for our partners as well. And because of all these reasons, we have also a very big financial weakness for the future, which is additional danger for possible acquisitions but also reducing our competitiveness. What we are doing, we divided this activity in two different time frame. The first time is short term. As I said, what is our main goal today is to survive, and also to restart our activity in the next few weeks. We hope that in next few weeks at least the European sky will be a bit more open. There are some airliners who has already opened some of their connections, but this is still very limited number of connections. Majority of them are internal connections. And then we will have a lot of problems, first with customer care in these new conditions, but the second, we have to rebuild everything, and including also rebuild our disruptive value chains, which partially are located out of Europe. And this is additional problem, not only today, but in the strategic term. And this is why I said that this presentation would be even the second, because my guests from Roland Berger Consulting Company, they will be much more precise. They have a very precise report about what's happened. Now, we would like to say more and stress more what we would like to be, how we would like to be supported by European Union to recover. And I think that, that there are three main areas. It is personal health protection, so regulations related to health protection, but also the shape of this regulation should be not too much against business, because we can imagine, regarding the aircraft, we can imagine situation in which every second seat is occupied because of safety reasons. We can understand also regulation in which every seat is occupied, but with some additional measures of safety. And for us, this decision, this is a regulative decision, but for us means business. Or we have 50% seats in aircrafts, or we have 100%. This is big difference. And we need also very strong financial support. In these circumstances, please understand, our sector achieved more than 90% reduction of turnover day by day. So we need still financial support for our companies, and support to reactivate travels. So this is partially this tourism support, which was very much mentioned by Commissioner Thierry Breton, is also extremely important for our sector, including not only typical tourism, but also this business tourism, conferences, which are very much affected by the COVID crisis, and also cash flow, especially SMEs. The problem that we are representing as EACP, mainly SMEs. Majority of our members are SMEs, and SMEs are in the most difficult position, because they are in the middle. We have organization of our sector is that we have OEMs, big producers in the top of supply chain, but we have also very strong consolidated partners in the bottom of our supply chain, because there are material producers, they are steel producers, they are casting producers. So strong partners from both sides of SMEs, which are in the middle. and we have the most difficult situation. Reduction of profits will be mainly devoted to this part of value chain of aviation. And also R&D. This is what I mentioned before. R&D is the first part of activity which would be reduced because of savings, of cost cutting. So here we need some additional money, easier money, European money, and also to speed up the already existing projects and allow us to accelerate our investments in R&D, including, for example, what was mentioned before the COVID and still we hope should be valid, I mean green aviation. And SMEs, what I mentioned before, SMEs, especially those working in the civil aeronautics sector. This is a group which is the most vulnerable for every market disruptions for this kind of crisis we have, and SMEs needs much more than others. But because I can understand that OEMs like Airbus, like Thales, like Leonardo can come to European Commission and say the same. No, we are big, we need more because we lost more. We can also consider to provide some incentives to OEM to help SMEs buy OEMs, but to expect from OEMs that they will support us. And I think clusters are very good organizations to do it. Because we are organizing a lot of companies, a lot of SMEs, and we have excellent communication between them. So we can be a channel of communication, channel of support. So I hope, last word, I hope that EACP became a fixed part of our European cluster alliance, of our activity, and will be involved in everything what we are doing for clusters and especially for our members, SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you, Christoph. We will return to your presentation, but for now, welcome Holger Lipowski, okay, from Roland Berger Consulting. I will give you the presentation rights. Okay. Can you speak?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Can you hear?
Yes, I hope
Hello.
you can hear me. Good morning, everybody. My name is Holger Lipowski from Roland Berger. It's a pleasure to speak in front of this group. I'm afraid I won't be able to share the slides because I only managed to dial in via my iPhone. So if maybe Christoph, if you can share the slides, let's give it a try. I think we will manage. So let me give you a quick introduction. So my name is Holger Lipowski. I'm partner at Roland Berger, a consulting company based in Europe. We have a dedicated team of people working on the aerospace and defense segments, and I'm one of them. So my background is actually in aerospace and defense. I work for various companies, for Rolls-Royce, for MTU, for Lufthansa Technics before I became a consultant. And I'm now with the company for 10 years, serving clients across the world. And interestingly, we have done many of those webinars over the past weeks. And only 2 weeks ago, we did one for the EACP. So that's interesting to hear that they are an active part of the ECA. And but the webinar we did for EACP is 2 weeks ago, and since then the world has moved, and the world is moving quickly in those times. So we are more than happy to present an updated version in this call today.
Just one moment.
Yes.
Christoph, do you have the presentation?
Yes, I'm looking for it because I was not prepared to do it, but
I can send to you again.
I should have it. Yes, I have it.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Ah, perfect.
Not yet. Not
Coming
yet.
up.
Yes.
Coming up.
Now we are seeing it. Thank you. Perfect.
So Holger, you have to just tell me when I should change the slide.
Yes, perfect. You can go to the next slide. That shows exactly. Is there a way to go to full screen mode?
No, because
No.
I have this in PDF, so
Okay.
it would be not
Anyway,
easy.
so the first slide shows a couple of pictures of my colleagues. I'm the guy at the top right, Manfred Hader. He was trying to dial in as well, but I think he had the same trouble as I had. So for the time being, I will take the lead, and he might join halfway through. And let's go to the next one immediately. So when we started to look at the crisis and its impact and modeling it, we took this obvious natural approach of things. We looked at it in 5 steps. First of all, the virus progression. Obviously, beginning in January, a number of regions got affected, and you have figures at your fingertips on a daily basis, how many infections we have seen across the world. So that's what we based our simulations on. And as an effect of this, governments across the world took restrictions. All those travel policies and travel restrictions came into place, and more or less the entire global, as Christoph said, global air traffic broke down to a massive extent. And that's exactly what we modeled. So we modeled the demand for travel. The KPI that we use is RPK. It's revenue passenger kilometers. So it's a number of people who travel times the distance. And the most important thing is then to derive what's the impact on the aviation industry. Aviation is what we define airlines and all the related companies, operators of airports and so on. That's the aviation impact, and then the aerospace impact, which is the industrial impact on people who build aircraft, like the big OEMs, Airbus, Boeing, but also all the suppliers, all the way down to small and medium sized enterprises. So that's the logic that we built, and we brought a couple of slides. The next one is how dramatic, and that's now exactly what Christoph was mentioning, put in writing, how dramatic the drop in travel was. And this one shows the groundings of the fleets. So the first line that dropped in mid of January is the China line. The fleet of China aircraft dropped to 55%. And it stayed at 55% for a very long time, for 3 months, until mid of April, until we saw some relief, and China is by now at roughly 40% of a grounded fleet. The other lines, like the Europe, North America, and even the global dark red line, they stayed at a fairly healthy level until beginning of March, mid of March, but then plunged even more dramatic than China. And Europe at the bottom was at 80%. 80% of the fleets of the European airlines were grounded, and that's massive. That's absolutely massive. So going to the next slide, we try to model the different drivers and understand the system of drivers, and that's interesting because we also modeled this over the past years. So we kind of had an established model before COVID, and this model was based on economic growth, on ticket and yield price, on government influences, on consumer spending, on globalization. So the first 5 of those drivers on this slide were what we call the traditional drivers. And what never happened before is that a number of new drivers, of significant change of behavior of people, of government restrictions in a dramatic way that has never been seen before, now kicked in and resulted in the lines that we just looked at. So we expanded our model with with drivers specifically for COVID-19, and those are remote business practices. I mean, it's absolutely on the one hand side good to see that a lot of business can be done remote, and then in some segments are quite good in this and in doing remote business practices. But ultimately, companies who produce physical products, they still need to let their people go into the factories and build parts and assemble components and ultimately assemble aircraft. So there's a limit to remote business practices, that's for sure. On top of this, health concerns were absolutely critical in COVID-19, comparing it to previous crises like SARS or 9/11 or the financial crisis. This health concern has never been so dramatic in the past, and this is why we also added longer term things into it to estimate how business travel or air travel will look in the future. Like, what will be a maximum load factor for an aircraft? Will it be 50%, 70%, 80%? Which processes will need to be established in order to make air travel work again? Processes at the airport, processes when embarking the aircraft, and so on. Processes disinfecting an aircraft between flights, and so on. All of this is absolutely new to the industry, and we're just at the beginning of seeing this to get into practice. So the slide that we are now looking at is the starting point of the quantitative modeling. So on the left-hand side, you see lines of air travel volume. That's again revenue passenger kilometers, and we came up with 3 scenarios. The scenario number 1 assumed that the travel restrictions would last for 2 months. We have to say that by now, this scenario number 1 is already unrealistic, because we are already in week 10 or 11 or so of all those restrictions. So we're afraid to say, but scenario number 1 is no longer realistic. So this is why I highlighted in the left-hand side scenarios 2 and 3. Scenario number 2 assumes that travel restrictions will be there for 4 months. Scenario number 3 assumes travel restrictions last for 6 months. And on top of this, one question that everybody asks is, by when will we reach travel levels again compared to before the crisis? And this is what I indicated in those 2 dashed lines with the arrows. So we do think that in best case during the year 2022, in the worst case during the year 2024, we will only see travel numbers on a global level compared to pre-crisis. So the crisis will last, from our perspective, minimum 2.5 years, maximum 3 years. And then we try to map that with airline data. So by when will, what everybody calls the new normal by now, by when will we see regular flight plans again of airlines? So the scenario number 2 assumes that the summer flight plan 2021, for example, will be a regular flight plan again, while scenario number 3 assumes it will last until the summer flight plan 2022, where we're going to see airlines being back at capacity of pre-crisis levels. So we do think the reality will be somewhere between scenario 2 and 3. Key question is, will it be more like scenario number 2 or more like scenario number 3? From our perspective, one of the key things that will distinguish whether we end up closer to scenario number 2 or closer to scenario number 3 is whether next outbreaks of infections will hit the industry, yes or no. So what we've then done based on this is we calculated aircraft production, and that's definitely very, very important for everybody who is in this segment as a supplier, as a maintenance provider whatsoever, and that's what the figures say. So the baseline was 17,500 aircraft delivered within the next 8 years. So the fleet today is roughly 22,000 aircraft. Pre-crisis, the projections said in the next 8 years there will be 17,500 new aircraft delivered. And as we go along those scenarios, we even skipped scenario number 1 on this slide because it's no longer realistic. Scenario number 2 says the number of cumulated delivered aircraft over the next 8 years will go down by 24%. And scenario number 3, which we split into 2 parts, I'm gonna comment on this in a minute. Numbers of produced aircraft over the next 8 years will go down by 43 to even 50%. And that's really something which will trigger structural and fundamental changes in this industry. The difference between scenario number 3A and 3B is mainly a behavior of airlines dealing with wide-body aircraft. Let me explain that to you. So scenario number 3 says we're going to have an accelerated retirement of older aircraft. So all those aircraft that have now been grounded, especially the older type wide-body aircraft like the A330, like the 767, like the 747, like the A380, those have a high risk never go back into service again. And that's what we modeled in scenario number 3A. And scenario number 3 says all those old aircraft will get back to service, which has an even higher impact on new deliveries. So from an industry point of view, from a supplier and manufacturer point of view, it would be beneficial if airlines grounded those older aircraft and don't get them into service again, but buy new aircraft, more efficient aircraft, especially in the wide body range, invest into the new types like A350 and 787. This costs money. So the question is, will airlines have enough money to place that investment? And one element driving this could be governmental aids. So at least in Germany, we have a large discussion with how much money the government shall help the Lufthansa Technik, and whether the government will even get shares or seat the board of Lufthansa again. It's like kind of a of a step backwards to governmental shares. And so that's what we are. But we are seeing this happening in Germany, and then we do think this is a scenario which might become into practice in other countries as well. So as soon as the government pays some money, it might link those payments with requirements for airlines to invest into new aircraft, and this is why we modeled this in such a way. One more impact is the aftermarket business, the MRO business, maintenance, repair, overhaul, and this is also heavily, even more heavily hit than the aircraft production. And this one, we do think it will go down by 50 to even 65-70%. And if airlines will stop those older type of aircraft and invest into new ones, it will be an even bigger hit for the maintenance providers, because the new aircraft will fly for a couple of years without any major significant maintenance jobs. So this segment, the aftermarket segment, will be hit even harder. Right. And in order to conclude my little talk, the next slide says what we think will happen and what type of measures we think will happen. We think the crisis in 3 steps. Number 1 is immediate crisis management. And I think we are largely done with that. It's about short-term measures. It's about financial support. It's about cost cutting. For example, we did a study for the German Association of the Industry and calculated what's the financial need overall for all SME companies in Germany. There's roughly 120 small medium enterprises in Germany supplying into this industry, and we calculated along different scenarios that the need for financial aid is in the order of 1 to 3 billion euros and this is a significant program that the government is now asked to put in place. But this is more or less done. Government needs now what to do, so we are looking forward to seeing this come into practice. And we do see that most of our clients, most of the companies we are in discussion with, enter into the second phase, the transition phase, which is they raise strategic questions again. So what needs to be done and how to position to be well prepared for the new normal. Is it a simple resizing, or is it even a restructuring, or is it a reorientation of the business focus? So those questions are now pretty essential for most of our clients. And on top of this, of course, there are operational issues. How will the supply chain be ramped up again? How to deal with operations and resources in the normal mode, how to put all those processes in place to make it work again. Right, and one more slide, which I think opens nicely a larger debate and opens nicely for a larger discussion. We put our heads together and thought, what, in general terms, what are the trends and which aspects of the industry might even benefit from this? So from top left to bottom right, research and development, this will definitely be hit. I mean, no one will now invest into development of the next generation aircraft, like this, the Boeing middle of the market aircraft, which has been in discussion, or even the next single aisle generation, the descendants of the descendants of the A320 or the 737. I think we won't see this in this decade again. Globalization is definitely something which is under pressure, so we do think there will be some regionalization again. We do think that the aftermarket will also be under massive restructuring, so OEMs might think to go into aftermarket. Private equity investors might go into the aftermarket. There will be a lot of distressed companies in that segment from our point of view, and we will definitely see a general consolidation, both in the aftermarket and in the civil world. Airlines will consolidate, the suppliers will consolidate, and it's just a matter of who will bring the money and who will put the chips on which bet. We do think that China can have a benefit from this, because they went through the crisis earlier, and they also recovered quicker, at least from what we saw in the figures. They recovered quicker, so they might exit stronger out of that crisis. And two topics that have been driving all the trend discussions prior to COVID, they are not dead yet. It's sustainability and automation. So those two topics were the key topics before COVID hit the world. They are now, no one talks about them anymore in that dramatic respect, but we do think they are still there. They are there to stay, and they will also become more and more important as the crisis effects will start to relieve. So that's our view on the industry and how it has been hit and how it might go forward. I hope that was interesting, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And you also see my contact details at the first page of the slide, and happy to get in touch and now also answer questions. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you to you, Holger. Very, very interesting.
Welcome.
As I was sure. Okay, and now it's the time to the dialogue between experts. Is a time not only for questions for those two speakers, but also for comments and other perspectives. We have only 22 minutes to summarize a lot of ideas. So you are invited to participate. Who is the first?
Antonio, can I make a very short question to Christoph?
Jaime, go on.
Okay. Christoph, what do you think it will be the evolution of the situation with Boeing with Airbus, with Embraer, with Bombardier, the big companies. We have here in Portugal a small investment of Embraer. We have some startups that were created along Embraer. What do you think it will be the evolution of all this situation between the big companies? It's a very short question.
Well, I am unfortunately I am quite pessimistic regarding that, and you can find it in this presentation of Holger. That expected number of new aircrafts is very much decreasing in comparison with what was planned. And additionally, in my opinion, this shock for OEMs would be even bigger than would be expected, because they had in mind very big increase of number of new aircrafts. I participated in the conference of Pacific Aviation Cluster in United States in Seattle just before the crisis of COVID. It was beginning of February. And I met Vice President of Boeing, and he was extremely optimistic. Just 1 month before all those things happened, he was extremely optimistic. He presented very, let's say, not only optimistic, but ambitious plan of building new aircrafts in the future. At this time, they had, I would like to remind you, they had this problem with Boeing 737 MAX. So they said we are going to recover with 737 crisis to the end of summer, and we have very ambitious plans for the future. Now everything has changed, and I think that that we will be very much impacted by OEMs. Will have to reduce number of staff, reduce number of suppliers. And we, SMEs, we will be very much affected by that, because we are the weakest part of value chain, unfortunately. So I am pessimistic. Sorry for saying that.
Thank you, Christoph.
May I make a question too? Do you consider that the large flights with a lot of people that create the fear to be together will open the opportunity for doing more smallest, I would almost say individual planes for people that need to travel but will to go alone?
I can only start, because this is about this urban air mobility question more, which is I think that all these new trends which were present at the market even before the crisis will be stronger now. I mean UAVs and this urban air mobility, individual flight measures, but this is something very for the future. And that's the distances for this kind of communication will be very limited, rather to the short range inside cities. And that's till now I cannot see it could be an replacement of big civil aviation. So this is not the competitive solution for the big civil aviation in my opinion. But I think what we are observing, that more automation is coming because of COVID, and more pressure on using, for example, UAVs. This we didn't discuss this in today's presentation. This is separate. This is separate, somehow connected market, but very interesting. I think this is for another discussion, how UAVs, drones, I mean, will be developed in near future, partially because of COVID. Especially there is a lot of new ideas in using UAVs, but not for personal, still not for personal communication, but rather for parcels, for some goods, but also for blood, for example. There were a lot of trials during these last days to use it. I think Holger could have his own vision about that.
Yes, yes, I totally agree. I totally agree. All those individual flights, urban air mobility has been a trend that was there before. I do think it can push this entire situation, will push the technological and even more so the what's the term, the regulatory process and progress which is needed. So in terms of vehicles, I mean, those kind of 4-person vehicles that can fly autonomously over a distance of up to 400 kilometers, that's technically feasible already. But in order to scale it, to make it a mass transport element, it's much more a matter of getting it regulatory wise and air traffic management wise done. And this is a very, very complex thing to achieve. So we do think this will still last 15, 20 years in that, somewhere in that area. But definitely there might be more money put into it, and especially it will put pressure on the regulation progress, which was pretty slow in the past years. But I don't think that from a technology point of view it has the chance to replace the long distance flights. It's more what we discussed with the airline clients is, for example, what the strategy of airlines will be for long distance flights. They could either go for larger aircraft with lower load factors, or they could go for smaller aircraft used for longer distance flights. It's today already possible to fly 6 or 7 hours, like Western Europe to East Coast America, to fly that with an A320 in a specific seat configuration. So you could think that airlines might have different strategies to react to this. And one of the models, the aircraft models, which we think might be a winner of that, is the A220. All those regional aircraft, that might be more interesting for airlines to fly within Europe. Question is, will there be additional safety measures needed inside the aircraft, like divider walls between seats? That's possible. Will there be a technological development in terms of how the air is being cleaned? I mean, the airlines, they already claim that it's safer to take a flight compared to sitting in a restaurant close to someone, because the air conditioning systems in an aircraft are very high tech. However, if someone sits half a meter next to you, difficult. So all of this is really not unclear. It impacts new products, new maybe new technologies in terms of air conditioning, but also it's not. It will depend on if the people will be willing to accept it. Would you accept sitting in an aircraft for 7 hours wearing a face mask? I doubt it. I doubt it. But I mean, we simply don't know yet how all of this will develop. But I mean, the crisis also seems now very, very serious. But there's also a tendency of mankind to go over such a crisis and to somehow forget the risks as soon as there is. I mean, ultimately, hopefully there will be a medical relief. There will be in vaccination. So once all of this is done, this health fear, which we see as one of the key drivers of the downturn, this will go away. It may take 2 more years or 3 more years, but in 10 years, I'm pretty sure that we will look at it from a distance and saying, yeah, that was interesting, but the industry will pick up again. I'm pretty sure. But it's definitely the longest lasting crisis in the history of commercial flight. I mean, all the crises in the past lasted for a couple of months, and the year after or 2 years after, flight levels and flight numbers were back to levels before the crisis. And this is really different now. So we think it will take 2 to 3 years.
Thank you very much. I will suggest, as we don't have many time, okay, I will suggest to focus on the experts' opinion, please, expert opinion about what can we do, what are the main challenges other than funding, that is very clear, okay, but we have just 10 minutes. What would you add to the discussion about what are disruptions that we could afford, and how could we do that, okay, through cluster or through the support of the European Commission, other than funding? That is very clear, okay? Please, 10 minutes. I see that there are a lot of experts here from other clusters, from other organizations. I'm sure that you can share your proposals. No comments? I have a question, okay? I saw in your presentation, Olga, that the Chinese OEM could grow, okay? And you see it as a positive effect. Could you explain how this could be positive for us?
Yeah, which exactly? The OEMs?
In the previous slide, okay, Christoph, could you go back one slide?
Yes, let me check.
Chinese. Okay, now I understand. The Chinese OEMs.
Yeah.
Chinese OEMs. Yes,
Chinese.
yes. So, yes, let me
Why
comment on this.
Why this is positive for us? Because it is extremely positive for Chinese.
Yes, yes.
I am thinking about how can we reinforce our industry? What kind of new opportunities really arise for the European industry, and how can we reinforce those opportunities? That will be the question.
So I think of it in 3 clusters. We got the Chinese, we got the Europeans, we got the Americans. So the Chinese, they will for sure become stronger, but that's per se and first of all a positive sign for China, not for Europe or America. However, we see that China has invested into companies in Europe over the past years. So we do see that China is interested to get knowledge and also supplies from specialized suppliers from Europe. So I do think if you manage as a tier 1 or tier 2 to become a trusted supplier for the Chinese aircraft programs, that could be more beneficial than we thought 5 years ago, because the numbers that they produce, the C191 or the 919 and the 929 are very small today, and today they have to rely on international suppliers, and we do think they cannot switch from one day to the other to local supplies. So they will rely on European and North American supplies. And if you are part of that program, 5 years ago, that was not attractive because not many aircraft were being produced. But we do think that those numbers will increase quicker than we thought prior to the crisis. So if you become a trusted supplier, that might be more interesting than in the past. On the other hand, we do think that Europe has a benefit over America. I mean, Boeing was massively hit with a 737 MAX crisis even before the COVID crisis. and now the COVID crisis has put them under so much pressure. It's really difficult for Boeing, and we think that Airbus in turn could benefit from this situation. So Boeing has for sure a very successful program with a 787, but it's really difficult to anticipate how the 737 MAX will come back after the crisis. And if it doesn't come back, then there's basically for the next 10-15 years there's just one aircraft in the single aisle market, which will be the A320. So we think that the A320 could be a very a type of aircraft which benefits massively from the crisis. So if you're a supplier into the A320 program, it will be good. On the contrary, if you are a supplier of the A350 wide bodies, first of all, numbers will stay down longer, and the 737 still has a viable competitor with a 787. So you have to distinguish as a supplier in which programs are you exactly. As I said, if you are a supplier of the A220, the previous C series of Bombardier, that could also be very beneficial. Yeah. So that's how we see it, and this also means for suppliers you need to check your portfolio to understand whether you are active in the good programs or whether you are active in programs which become under pressure, which come under pressure.
Thank you very much. Okay, other questions?
Yeah, I do have a question to Holger. You mentioned automation as slightly having a positive impact. I met the experience with our companies in the past that the companies are interested in automation, but in terms of having 5% in aerospace or 20% on turnover, it makes no sense for them to automate the processes. So why do you expect in general that it will have still a slight positive impact in automation?
Yeah, so one of the drivers is that you might want to find ways to reduce the number of people involved in, for example, aircraft assembly. So people as resources have become critical because you need to make sure that they follow the rules, and you have to put a lot of processes in place to separate people and so on, implement different shift systems, at least during this most critical time of the crisis. And that led to some discussions, especially with OEMs that we had, thinking about how to further automate the assembly processes. A lot of that is already automated, but there's still a lot of man labor, touch labor involved in aircraft assembly. And we agree it's not a massive trend, and automation in aerospace has never been as dramatic and as paceful compared to automotive automation, for example. But we do think that there's a chance for specialized automation providers to benefit from the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to make a question. It's not very easy to enter into in aeronautics company and make automation, because they have very strict safety regulations, and we know that since the design of aircraft until put the aircraft in the market, it could 20 years, for instance, and we need to change the regulations to have more agile regulations for aircraft. So I think that the producers that were most strongly hit by this pandemic was the biggest one we see that Boeing canceled the contract with Embraer. And I think that this will give opportunity to appear new kinds of producers. I think so. I think that could be here a chance to change the regulations and also to appear new producers of aircrafts. I would like to know your opinion about this.
I'd say theoretically yes, but it's a very long way to go to establish yourself or establish as a new aircraft provider, not just a supplier or a component supplier, but an OEM of aircraft. That's a very, very long way to go. We do see that some new systems might become important. So innovations in air conditioning, innovations in propulsion systems, innovation in handling systems, for example. So we do think that there's a chance for component suppliers to enter, but the way to establish as an aircraft OEM, that's a very, very long way to go. And we've seen Bombardier struggling massively. Embraer has kind of found its niche, but has never made it up to a real competitor in the single aisle market. But has definitely found a good niche in business in regional jets. And the Chinese, they have put very, very much effort into it, as a kind of a state effort, so to speak. Yeah. And they managed, they have a good product. They now need to ramp it up, and we think they can do it. The Russians with the MS-21, also a fairly good product, but still you can see it took them 20 years to do it, and they are still at production levels, I don't know, a handful of aircraft per year or so. Yeah, it's really, really difficult. So I wouldn't encourage anyone to go that route.
Thank you.
Okay, may I have a question?
For sure, Marek.
Yeah, Marek, European Commission, I thank you very much for fantastic, very informative presentations. Just coming back to the clusters and possibility of how clusters can react at this very moment for disruption. There are two elements. This is very high-tech industry, so the people are very high skilled, and so the flexibility of moving between sectors is rather possible. So how sectors can help while jobs will be the probably lost to move to other sectors. One question. The second question, if it's about the resilience, and if you have noticed already the process of taking over the SMEs basically at tier 2, tier 3 level, so that there's you mentioned opportunity to selling to Chinese, but as well there is a threat that the companies will be simply taken over. And
yes.
And the third question about the tier 2, tier 3 companies which are relying only on aircraft industry, if there's not a chance to in midterm to really think, and this is something that we are talking about as resilience, of repurposing and having flexible production, so that the market is diversified, and hence we have more resilience. If you can refer to these three questions. Thank you.
Maybe about clusters, let me, Marek, tell you briefly my opinion. This is really the problem for aviation clusters, because we have a huge reduction of orders. Our companies, which belongs to aviation clusters, have to reduce their staff. And the problem is that the closest to us sector, which naturally we are working with, because my companies, for example, in my Silesian aviation cluster, I have companies which are working in majority in aviation sector, but partially in automotive. And automotive is another problematic sector now. So it is really very difficult to go out from this corner for SMEs, from aviation SMEs. And going to the second question about this Chinese acquisitions, this is something which could be very interesting to discuss, because from the strategic perspective of European Union, I suppose that this Chinese overtaking, this takeovers, Chinese takeovers, could be considered as a not positive strategically from a European Union point of view. But for those companies, as you mentioned, tier 2, tier 3 SMEs, sometimes it could be the only one solution to be sold or to achieve at least some strong investor, even from China. So I think that this is something which should be discussed inside even European Commission, if you are considering it as a danger or as an advantage, because for individual companies, these Chinese investors will be considered as an advantage. What about the national, the European point of view? I don't know. This is something which needs a response from regulatory or administrative point of view. That's from my side, Holger.
Yes, maybe let me comment on the fear or the risk of getting closer to the Chinese and the Chinese money. It has pros and cons, that's for sure. I worked with 2 companies in the past years that have been taken over by Chinese investors, and I have to say it worked quite well. So I was also cautious, but those 2 companies have been taken over by Chinese, and so far they have been allowed and managed to stay very independent and then keep developing. But on top of this, they became a certified supplier of the C919 program, which can be very beneficial for them. So I think there's a chance in it. Generally speaking, I think we have passed those times where Chinese take over just to get their hands on Western IP and so on. It needs to be managed, and all those IP rights need to be properly defined in shareholder agreements and all of this, but this can be done. And those 2 examples which I worked on over the past years, they worked pretty good. And now we see that those companies might really benefit from the fact that they have now less dependence on American or European programs. So I do think there's a chance in it. Yeah. What was the third question again? Sorry.
About jobs flexibility within cross-clustering.
Yes. Yes, you're right. It's definitely a high-tech sector, and many people are really skilled. Thing is, where to go? And as Christoph said, the natural thing to do is to go from one high-tech to another high-tech industry, comparable in terms of processes and so on. The automotive one is the closest one, which is definitely also very much under pressure. I think in technology, or let's say electronics, for example, or avionics, I mean, there are many jobs which are not super specific to aerospace. If you're an electronics technician, you could simply go anywhere. If you're a designer, you have more flexibility to move. But generally speaking, I think it's not that easy. So if OEMs really cut down their production lines, not only in the short term as they have already started. I mean, Airbus just released production figures going down to 60% or even 50% on some lines. So if that will last for more than 12 months, I think it will be really difficult, and we will see a high number of people being laid off.
Let me add one thing regarding this qualified staff. This is something which we just touched today. I think that all these unmanned systems, that this is something which is rising. Europe is still very weak, frankly speaking, in this regard, in this sector, and I think that we should even devote a specific separate meeting, Antonio, to discuss only this new sector, which is subsector of aviation, which of something on the crossroad between aviation and ICT electronics, which is UAVs. Because this sector, in my opinion, this subsector will grow. The problem is that it's still very small, and we are beginners. I mean, there is no real market of these products in Europe and in our member states. So I think that if we want to, if I would be somebody in the European Commission very high, I could say, okay, guys, this is very promising sector. This is the sector of the beginners. Let's pay more R&D money on this sector, and maybe move those people from aviation sector, this qualified staff, to be involved for some months, maybe for some, maybe even years, maybe these 2 years of the highest risk, to be moved to develop new European solutions in unmanned aircrafts. Not only solutions, I mean technological solutions, but also organizational service solutions, regulatory solutions, ICT, automatic, etc. And maybe some of them, if we are able to build stronger sectors, some of them will stay forever in this sector, and some of them could come back after this huge R&D effort. They could come back to aviation sector when it be rebuilt after those 2, even in negative scenario, 3 years. So I think UAV is something we should discuss deeper. And also there is another thing we didn't even start today, and this is part of this sector, which is defense. This is the question. This is another sector which is a sector crossroading with aviation, with aerospace. Now, this sector is something which is also related very much to budgetary money. So if the government doesn't have money, they don't spend it, especially on military expenditures. But at the same time, as if we are asking about capacity, about qualifications of staff, the easiest way for those from aviation, civil aviation, is go to military aviation. But if there will be cost cutting, budgetary cost cutting in our countries because of COVID, because of degrees of taxes, then military expenditures will be also one of the first to be affected. So as you see, this is a circle, very difficult to solve it, but somebody has to make some decisions. So I think that it should be also some signal, some argument for governments not to cut significantly those military expenditures, because civil happened. It happened. We cannot change what happened last 3-4 months. Military, maybe the way to support aviation is to go through military expenditures.
Thank you, Christoph, and we will organize that session on your UFB. Yeah.
I agree with all of that. But also, I think that a lot of other sectors need the normal aviation to work again, quick. For instance, tourism depends on that. So, what about to work on the main constraints that stopped aviation in these days? I think Holger's presentation was really clear on showing the importance of the government rules. I don't mean the long-term rules, but those that stop the flights, and also the fear of people. So I think the solution for not only aviation but also the other sectors that depend on them is to work on those two fronts.
Thank you. Thank you. It's quite late. Okay. I think it has been extremely interesting. I think it's time to close. Thank you very much, Christoph and Holger. Your contribution has been highly valuable. Please, if you don't mind, send us the presentations. Okay, they will be shared in the European Cluster Collaboration Platform webpage that I have shared in the chat. Okay, and we will for sure return to you soon. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Holger, for being with us.
Welcome, Christoph. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.